Clearwater Depot, Wyoming Territory, autumn 1883. 20-year-old Emma Whitfield sat on a worn depot bench with her 6-month-old daughter, Grace, watching the afternoon train disappear into the distance. The same train her husband had boarded without looking back. Left with nothing but a carpetbag and a note that read, "I never wanted this." She faced a brutal reality. Abandoned in a frontier town where no woman alone survived without help. Then, as sunset approached, a quiet rancher named Cole Bennett stopped to water his horse and noticed the desperate young mother. His simple question, "Ma'am, do you have somewhere to go?" would change 3 lives forever. Chapter 1. The Waiting Bench. The afternoon sun stretched long shadows across Clearwater Depot's wooden platform when Emma Whitfield realized her husband wasn't coming back. She had been sitting on that bench since morning, baby Grace cradled against her chest, watching passengers come and go while hope slowly bled out of her like water from cracked pottery. October 14th, 1883, brought the kind of crisp autumn day that made the Wyoming grasslands glow gold under endless sky. Emma wore her best dress, though it was faded now from too many washings. Grace slept fitfully against her shoulder, occasionally whimpering in that way babies do when they sense their mother's distress. The carpetbag at Emma's feet contained everything they owned. The note sat folded in her pocket. James had written it in careful script, explaining how he'd secured a position in San Francisco and how a wife and child would only complicate his fresh start. He'd left $20 under the sugar tin, enough to ease his conscience, but not enough to change their situation. By afternoon, Emma had memorized the schedule posted on the depot wall, though she had no money for passage and nowhere to go. The depot master had stopped asking if she needed help around the 3rd hour. Clearwater wasn't a town that tolerated strays for long. Women without protection didn't last in frontier territories. The sun dropped lower, painting the sky in shades of amber and rust. The boarding house wouldn't take them without payment. The church was 2 miles out of town, and night came fast this time of year. She was calculating how long $20 might stretch when she heard hoofbeats. A rider approached slowly on a patient bay horse. The man wore working clothes, worn denim, a faded shirt, a hat darkened by sweat and trail dust. His face was weathered but not old, perhaps 30 years, with features the sun had carved into permanent squints. His hands showed scars from ranch work, and he wore no wedding ring. Cole Bennett had come to town for supplies. He'd noticed the young woman through the store window, still sitting in the same spot she'd occupied when he'd arrived hours earlier. Something about her stillness troubled him. He finished watering his horse and prepared to mount when Grace's cry cut through the evening air. It wasn't a hungry cry. It was the sound of a baby sensing her mother's breaking heart. Cole found himself turning toward the depot instead of toward home. Cole stopped a respectful distance away, hat in his hands. His voice came quietly and carefully. He asked if she had somewhere to go. Emma's throat tightened. She simply shook her head, that small gesture containing her entire world's collapse. Cole studied her for a long moment, then asked something unexpected. Could she cook? When Emma nodded uncertainly, he continued. His ranch sat 5 miles north. He'd been running it alone since his sister moved to Colorado, and the place showed his bachelor ways. If she needed work and shelter, he needed help making the house livable. The arrangement would be proper. She'd have her own room. Just honest work for honest pay. She asked why he would help them. Cole's answer was simple and honest. Good people sometimes end up in bad situations through no fault of their own. His sister would want him to help if she were here. And the house really did need a woman's touch. That part wasn't charity, just plain fact. Emma looked down at Grace, whose small face was screwed up in distress. She thought of the empty platform, the approaching night, the $20 that wouldn't last a week. When she looked up, Cole was already securing his packages to his saddle. Emma stood on trembling legs, gathered her carpetbag, and asked one more question. What was his name? Cole Bennett. He replied, then asked for hers. When she told him, he nodded once and gestured toward his horse with quiet confidence. Chapter 2. The Ride North. The wagon Cole borrowed smelled of hay and horse sweat. They left Clearwater as the sun touched the horizon, painting everything in shades of fire and shadow. Emma held Grace close, the baby's cries finally subsiding as the wagon's rhythm worked its ancient magic. Cole drove with steady hands, not trying to fill the silence with empty words or prying questions. Emma appreciated that more than he could know. The prairie night came alive around them. Coyotes called in the distance, their voices rising and falling. Above them, stars appeared in impossible numbers. Grace finally surrendered to exhaustion. Emma lay her gently in the blanket nest Cole had prepared, then settled back onto the bench. Only then did Cole speak. He told her about his ranch, 200 acres of grassland, a house that had seen better days, and a barn that leaked when it rained. His father had passed 3 winters ago, leaving Cole alone except for his sister Martha, who'd helped until she'd met a mining engineer and followed him to Colorado 6 months back. The house had been built to hold a family, but now rattled with empty space. Martha had tried to maintain order, but once she left, things had deteriorated. Dishes piled up, laundry went unwashed, and dust claimed every surface. He wasn't looking for charity, he insisted. He genuinely needed help. A woman's touch made the difference between existing and living, his mother used to say. She'd passed when Cole was barely 15. Emma asked about the work he expected, cooking mainly, and general housekeeping. Laundry when needed, maybe tend a garden come spring. He'd handle ranch work, cattle, repairs, everything that required muscle and calluses. The money part came next. Room and board for her and Grace, plus $2 a week in actual coin. It wasn't wealth, but it was security. Emma calculated quickly. In a year, she could save over $100. The ranch house appeared as a dark shape against a darker sky, marked by a single lamp burning in a window. Cole had left it lit that morning, a habit from when Martha lived here. He'd kept doing it even after she left. Inside, lamplight revealed exactly what Cole had described. The front room held furniture arranged with bachelor's practicality. The kitchen showed signs of a man who cooked because he had to. But the house was solidly built, with good bones beneath the neglect. Cole led her upstairs and showed her the middle room, already prepared with fresh linens. A rocking chair sat near the window. A dresser stood against one wall. Most importantly, the room had a door that closed and a lock that worked, details Cole mentioned carefully, making sure Emma understood her privacy would be respected. He left her with a lamp, mentioning breakfast would be at dawn if she felt up to cooking, or whenever she woke if she didn't. No pressure, no demands. Emma stood alone in the room and realized she was crying. Not from grief this time, but from the overwhelming strangeness of finding kindness in the worst moment of her life. She laid Grace on the bed and walked to the window. Outside, the prairie stretched endlessly under starlight. Somewhere out, there was Clearwater Depot, where she'd waited all day for rescue that never came. And here was rescue anyway, delivered by a stranger on a tired horse. When Grace stirred, Emma settled into the rocking chair to nurse. The house creaked around them, settling into the night. Tomorrow would bring work and uncertainty. But tonight, Emma had a roof overhead, a lock on her door, and a baby feeding peacefully in her arms. For the first time since James had disappeared, Emma allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she and Grace would be all right. Chapter 3. Finding Rhythm. Dawn came cold and clear. Emma woke to unfamiliar sounds. Cows lowing, chickens clucking, and below, the clatter of someone trying to start a fire in the wood stove. Grace lay beside her, awake but quiet. Emma dressed quickly, changed, and fed Grace, then ventured downstairs. Cole stood in the kitchen, staring at the stove with intense concentration. He'd managed to get a fire started, but smoke leaked from several joints. Relief crossed his features when Emma entered. Within the hour, Emma had smoke flowing properly, coffee brewing strong, and bacon sizzling. She'd found eggs in the cold pantry and bread that needed using. Cole sat at the table, watching her work with quiet appreciation. They ate without much conversation, but it was comfortable silence. Cole's manners were better than expected. He waited for her to sit before starting, passed things without being asked, and thanked her with genuine gratitude. After breakfast, Cole explained his daily routine. He'd be out until midday checking fences and tending cattle, back for lunch, then out again until supper. He'd handle evening chores while she'd manage the house. On Sundays, he didn't work unless something demanded it. Once alone, Emma set Grace in a basket and began assessing the house. Beneath the bachelor neglect, she found signs of the family that had lived here. Samplers stitched by Cole's mother still hung on the walls. His father's pipe collection sat on the mantel. Martha's cookbook filled the kitchen shelf. This house had been loved once. It just needed reminding. Emma started with small victories. She swept the kitchen floor until it no longer gritched underfoot. She washed windows until light poured through. She organized the pantry logically. Grace watched from her basket, occasionally offering gurgles and coos. By lunch, Emma had beef stew simmering and cornbread cooling. Cole ate with focused attention, then surprised Emma by carrying his dishes to the sink without being asked. That afternoon, Emma tackled laundry. She heated water, hauled the heavy tub outside, and spent 2 hours scrubbing and hanging everything to dry. The physical work felt good after yesterday's helplessness. Cole returned at supper to find the house transformed. Clean windows glowed golden. His laundry hung drying in neat rows. He stood in the doorway for a long moment before seeking Emma out to offer quiet thanks. The days that followed settled into a rhythm. Emma woke with the sun, prepared breakfast, and saw Cole off to his work. She'd spend mornings on heavy cleaning while Grace napped, afternoons on lighter tasks. Cole returned faithfully at noon and evening. By the end of the first week, Emma had made noticeable progress. But more than physical changes, something else was shifting, subtle as a season turning, but just as inevitable. They began to talk during meals. At first, just practical matters, which fence needed repair, which hen wasn't laying. But gradually the conversation expanded. Cole mentioned his childhood, riding with his father to check trap lines. Emma shared stories of her sister, carefully avoiding mention of James. One evening, Cole brought in firewood and found Emma struggling to reach a high shelf. He fetched the item without comment, but his hand brushed hers during the exchange. Both pulled back quickly, suddenly aware of proximity and possibility. Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks while Cole cleared his throat and returned to his firewood with unusual focus. That night, Emma lay awake listening to the house breathe around her. She thought about Cole's quiet competence, his careful respect, the way his eyes followed her sometimes. She thought about how quickly she'd come to appreciate his presence, his steady routine, his gentle way with Grace. It was dangerous territory, these feelings creeping in unwanted. Emma had no business thinking about Cole Bennett as anything but her employer. She was damaged goods, abandoned by her husband, left like trash at a depot. But lying there in the darkness, feeling safe for the first time in months, Emma couldn't quite convince herself that safety was enough. Something in her chest had begun to wake up, some hope she'd thought James had killed completely. Chapter 4. Home Before Sunset. October gave way to November, with frost painting morning silver. Emma had been at the ranch 3 weeks, each day adding layers to the life she was building. The house had transformed completely. Grace had grown more alert and interactive, smiling now with real smiles that crinkled her whole face. Cole had discovered that making funny faces at breakfast could earn him giggles that made him grin. Cole had changed, too. He talked more, shared stories with actual enthusiasm. He'd started washing up before supper without being asked. When he looked at Emma, something in his expression had softened, moved past simple appreciation into territory neither had yet acknowledged aloud. The letter arrived on a Thursday. Emma was kneading bread when she heard hoofbeats. Cole was out checking on a cow, so Emma wiped flour from her hands and accepted the envelope. Inside, the formal letterhead announced it came from an attorney in Cheyenne. James Whitfield had died in a railroad accident outside San Francisco. As his legal widow, Emma was entitled to his modest effects, $73 and assorted personal items. The letter felt strange in her hands. James was dead. The man who'd abandoned her. Gone, just like that. Emma should feel something. Grief, maybe, or vindication. Instead, she felt mostly numb, and beneath that, a guilty flutter of relief. She was still holding the letter when Cole returned. Emma showed him without explanation. Cole read slowly, then looked at her with something careful in his eyes. He asked if she was all right. Emma surprised herself by laughing, though it came out sharp. Her husband had died, and she felt mostly relief that he couldn't come back and claim Grace. Did that make her terrible? Cole's answer came without hesitation. It made her human. James Whitfield hadn't behaved like a husband should. Whatever Emma felt was her own business and nothing to apologize for. Emma realized she was crying, just tears running down her face. Cole pulled her into his arms, careful and gentle, offering nothing but solid presence while she shook with tears she hadn't known she needed to cry. Cole's hand moved slowly across her back while his voice rumbled low. She was safe, he promised. She and Grace both. Nothing would change that. When Emma finally pulled back, Cole's eyes held something new and undeniable. He spoke then, words that came rough with honesty. He'd offered her employment 3 weeks ago because it seemed right. But somewhere along the way, it had stopped being just about housekeeping. He looked forward to meals because she'd be there. He hurried through morning work so he could return sooner. He lay awake nights thinking about her, wondering if she ever thought about him too. Emma's breath caught. She should discourage this, protect herself. But looking at Cole, solid, kind Cole who'd rescued her from a depot bench, she couldn't make the careful words come. Instead, she admitted her own truth. She did think about him, more than she should. She'd started listening for his footsteps, watching the clock, finding excuses to catch his eye. It frightened her, feeling things again when she'd barely survived feeling things before. Cole stepped closer, giving her time to move away. When she didn't, he tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear with calloused fingers that somehow managed gentleness. James Whitfield had been a fool, he told her. Any man who'd leave Emma and Grace deserved what he'd gotten. But Cole wasn't James. He knew what he wanted, and if she'd let him, he'd spend the rest of his days proving he'd never disappear or leave a note that broke her heart. Emma looked up into his weather-worn face and made the bravest choice of her life. She said yes, not to anything specific, just yes to possibility, yes to trying again, yes to believing that some men actually meant what they promised. Cole kissed her then, slow and careful. Emma kissed him back, tasting coffee and hope and the beginning of something she hadn't dared imagine 3 weeks ago. Behind them, Grace let out an approving shriek, making them both laugh. Cole picked up the baby while Grace grabbed his nose with determined fists. Emma watched them together and felt the last pieces of her broken heart shift and resettle into something that might, eventually, be whole again. That night, after supper and after Grace had been settled, Emma and Cole sat on the front porch watching stars emerge. The prairie stretched vast around them while the house glowed warm at their backs. Cole held Emma's hand and talked about the future in terms that included all three of them. Come spring, he said, they could expand the garden. Grace would be walking by then. Maybe they'd add chickens. The house needed painting, and that upstairs bedroom would make a fine nursery. Emma listened and realized she was smiling. Not a small, careful smile, but a real one that reached her eyes. She'd arrived broken, abandoned, with nothing but a baby and a carpetbag. 3 weeks later, she had a home, work she took pride in, and a man who looked at her like she was exactly what he'd been hoping for. Emma leaned her head against Cole's shoulder and whispered something she'd never thought she'd mean again. She was home, not just in the house, but here beside him, watching stars while Grace slept peacefully inside. After everything that had gone wrong, she'd somehow ended up exactly where she needed to be. Cole pressed a kiss to her head and agreed. Then he suggested they head inside before the cold settled in. They'd have time for porch sitting come summer. For now, they had a warm house waiting, a baby to check on, and all the tomorrows they'd spend building something together. Emma rose and let Cole guide her inside. Behind them, the prairie stretched dark and vast, but ahead, lamplight glowed golden and welcoming. She was home before sunset, just as Cole had promised. And unlike every other promise broken in her life, this one would last. What started as abandonment at a depot became the foundation of a family built on kindness and second chances. If this story of finding home in unexpected places touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments which moment moved you most. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.